Hello and welcome to another episode of Top Deck, the series where we take a look at some of the leading TCG deck lists. On today we have Rob, who took this hero list to the Team Sneak Attack Regional and made top 16. So this is a pretty awesome list, I've got to say. It's focused on the new sort of hero spamming ability thanks to the impressive new Vision heroes, being Faris and Increase chucked into the main deck. Plus we have all of the new cool sort of like Destiny Evil hero stuff. So we've got the Evil Hero Adjusted Gold in here and the Fusion Destinies, as well allowing you to put some impressive OTKs onto the board and start some combos off too. So let's run through the list first off. So for hand traps we have Triple Ash, Triple Nibiru and Triple Imperm. Then we have a bunch of sort of like hero engine requirements as starter cards. So obviously Double Mally is a necessary card in order to get all of your combos going. We've got Celestial here for some of the combos. Bubbleman is sort of like a tech spot. Honest Neos is basically just Honest for the deck. There's double Shadow Mist in here. The deck sort of does try to pump through more copies of Darklore and stuff. And Solid Soldier is here for the combos. Then the Vision Heroes, as we mentioned, as well as the Vions here too, also starter cards for the deck. A Hero Lives, obviously. Dark Calling, I believe this is searchable so that you can play off on your following turns. Triple E Emergency Call because it starts your combos if you get your access to Stratos and stuff. Triple Fusion Destiny, Triple Mask Change. There's some cool stuff in the extra deck, which is why this is incorporated. One Poly, one Rota, and yeah, that's everything from the main deck. For the extra deck, we have a Dangerous, Dystopia, Absolute Zero, the Malicious Bane, the brand new printed card, which it's just kind of nuts in terms of what it offers you. One Acid, one Anki, double Darklore, one Adoration, used for the combos, same with the Trinity, one Dweller, double Extra Hero Cross Crusader, one Dread Decimator, and one Wonder Driver. So in terms of, sort of price point, I don't think this deck is super expensive. Most of certainly the main deck you can pick up fairly cheaply, and the extra as well. I think it's just a few like random releases from recent events, or recent sets, sorry, that results in it being a little bit more pricey. So definitely the kind of deck that a budget player could pick up and take to an event, and it has an enormous ceiling in terms of like just power that you can push through in every single turn. For the side deck we have Triple Lancia, one Plasma, double Pancratops, double Ghost Ogre, double Dark Rule No More, double Twisters, and a triple Red Reboot. Let's move on to the siding strategy then. So in terms of siding, we have sort of four major matchups to go against. First off is Sky Striker, putting in the Twisters and the Ghost Ogres, enabling you to sort of deal with all of the problem cards that they put out, and Nibiru's and one Imperm allow you to just free up some space. Nibiru obviously does nothing in this matchup. For going second, you also get to put the Pancratops in. That's a little bit more removal, and it has enormous value in this matchup. You do have to take out some extra stuff, so we see a Bubbleman and a Shadow Mist coming out as well. For against Thunder, Lanciers and Plasma coming in when you're going first. They really struggle with that Plasma actually. Taking out the Ash Blossoms and the Bubbleman, I think that's fairly reasonable. The Bubble doesn't offer you enormous value in this particular matchup. It's really just for the back row based decks, I think, because of that access to the extra deck monsters. And then for going second, again, we see Lancia come in and Dark Rule No More this time. Taking out one copy of Shadow Mist here, it can end up putting you in a more bricky position, where when you're going second, you're really just trying to push through the board and try and get enough damage on, or just establish your Darklore after you've done enough. For Orcust, in come the Lanciers, out go the Nibirus. The deck is significantly slower in its current state, which means that Nibiru doesn't always actually resolve against them. And then for going second, keeping in the Nibirus actually, because you expect them to put a little bit more pressure on against you, and it's just nice to have as a defensive card. But as a result, you've got to take something out, so the Shadow Mist, Bubbleman, and one Fusion Destiny come out here. For the trap decks, obviously the Red Reboots and the Twin Twisters come in, and Nibiru's really not going to do much, nor do the Imperms, so they will come out. And that is the same whether you go first or second. This is a very typical thing we see from a lot of side decking, is when you go first or second against a slower deck, you pretty much always side exactly the same way, because you're going to be dealing with them in exactly the same problematic states. So really solid in terms of the siding strategy there. How about the rounds that you played? Well, he played a 7-round event, 2 losses from this event. So round 1, going up against Sky Striker, Rob managed to win the dice roll and end on a board that could make Darklaw against his opponents, who then proceeded to set 2 and pass, and then for the next turn it was basically just beat down until game was achieved. Game 2 was very control based, where the opponent ended up actually beating him, and then in game 3 Rob obviously went first. His hand was pretty good, being able to play through almost any hand trap and burn through the opponent with 4 minutes left on the clock, but unfortunately for him, his opponent had a Droll Lockbird, which obviously this deck has to do quite a bit of searching in order to resolve all of the effects that you need, so Rob was unable to end on a board that could burn his opponent. They just made a Kaina and then resolved the 100 effect in order to win that game in time there. Round 2 against Pendulum, 2-0 here. Losing the dice roll but opening Imperm and Ash Blossom makes the opponent end on a really kind of awkward board of Vortex and Herald. And then Rob could just OTK through this. In game 2 he opened the Ghost Ogre and the Nibiru, let his opponent play until they Pendulum summoned, then Nibru'd them, and then Ghost Ogre a Servant, and proceeded to OTK in the following turn. I think this deck just establishes OTKs from very low resources, which is really, really nice actually. Round 3 against Thunder Dragon, a 2-1 here. Losing the dice roll once again, but opening Nibiru, which halts the opponent's turn to a degree. They were still able to end on a Titan, but they put it in attack position, which makes it really easy to just OTK through it. And then in game 2, lost the game because Rob Nibiru'd here. He opened a hand that wasn't the best, so he was unable to combo due to the opponent having an Imperm just used on the Stratos. Sometimes that can be enough to actually just stop a hero player in their tracks, unfortunately. And then the following turn the opponent just killed him. And then in game 3, Rob went first, ended on a board with Plasma, Honest Hero, Neos in hand, and a Lancia, which pretty much seals the game, preventing the opponent from playing, and allowing Rob to beat him in time. Round 4 against Danger Zombie, 2-0 here, winning the dice roll, ending on double Darklaw with access, just being enough to stop the opponent from actually playing the game, as they were able to be hand looped for 2 cards. Then Rob just proceeded to OTK after that because the majority of the useful cards were just banished from the opponent. Game 2, the opponent made Rob go first, which is pretty interesting. So he opened a hand of Vion, 2 Ash, 2 Ogre, which is really awkward, so he just ended on Cross Crusader and pass. There's no Isolde in the deck, so it's not able to make the sort of insane pushes off a single card that some of the other decks can do if it happens to be a Vion, but it can still do some really cool stuff regardless. So unfortunately he just had to pass there with the Stratos in hand added. Luckily for Rob, his hand traps were actually enough to stop the opponent from playing, so he then proceeded to OTK the opponent in the following turn and seal off that 2-0 victory. Round 5 against Sky Striker again, 2-1 this time. Rob won the dice roll, proceeded to make the usual board with the Darklaw, got super polyed for game in that one, unfortunately. The following two games, he just played around the super poly and won from there, which seems pretty reasonable, to be honest. Round 6, another Sky Striker matchup, 2-1 this time, winning the dice roll, but got outgrinded game 1. Game 2, the match went on for a really long time, but Rob managed to get the opponent below 1,000 and then attack into a Shizuku with an Honest Neos and damage step, so seals the game there. And then in game 3, he went second, but the opponent opened a hand of hand traps. Rob was able to just sort of play through each of those anyway, because this deck can just push through so much, like so much weak interaction. He got to the Stratos and the Evil Bane, and that allowed him to beat down the opponent in the following turns. The final round against Sky Striker, once again, but an 0-2 loss this time. Winning the dice roll, bricking game 1 with a very bad hand of Poly, Dark Calling, and 2 Ash with the Stratos. Just summoned the Stratos, searched for a Stratos and passed. The opponent had 3 engages, so that was a 100% loss there. And then in game 2, it was 2 minutes from time. They were both in a position with very little resources left, and the opponent put on a Mystic Mine, which obviously stops Rob from being able to kill the opponent. The opponent then had a Super Poly as well, which is just way too much, seals the game, leaving just Rob on 5,800 life points, and then the opponent just summoned a Hayate, and then was able to just resolve off so much and win from there. So a bit unfortunate with bricking in the final round, and then going up against Triple Engage, but sometimes that is just how it happens. So a pretty awesome record, going a 5-2 from this event with this really, really nice looking hero deck. Before we go any further, let's bring on Rob and ask him some more about this deck. Hi Rob, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing good. Nice to be on your channel, Joe.
Well, thanks very much for coming on and for sharing this list. I've got to say, I've always been a huge fan of anyone who can take heroes to a competitive event and do something pretty impressive with it. So definitely winning in my book.
Heroes are my favourite, so gotta do it if I can.
Absolutely. Well, they're tons of people's favourites. It's just such a cool archetype in general, and plus, it's got so much support from great TV series. Yeah. So I was just going to say that it's already a very cool deck, but obviously this is a list that you took to the previous ban list version, right? So you've only got the 2 Malicious in this.
Yes, I do. The 2 Malicious, 2 Stratus.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, potentially the deck gets even better, right?
Yes, the deck gets a lot better with 3 Malicious and 3 Stratus now. It's way more consistent, and this Bird Mally just gives you so much more. So definitely even better now than it was previous ban list.
Yeah, I think it just it pushes so much more onto the board, it has so much more potential. So in terms of the event then, how did you find it overall?
Well, the event was good. I would say that I could have done a lot better. It was just the last round I had a brick at the end of it, and also round 1 I did lose because of time reasons. But the event was amazing, and I feel like this deck performed amazing there, and it could have definitely gone further if it wasn't for those 2 little situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're interested in checking out this particular event and how it went, I believe, Rob, you actually have a vlog for this up on your own channel already.
Yep, it was a fun day, to say the least. Lots of judges were great, people were great. It was just a whole load of fun, and I even got to yell time on the round, which was a bit of fun.
Yeah. Always good to get the opportunity.
Yeah.
So I do want to ask. I mean, obviously we know it's a very cool archetype. We know it has a lot of potential. But why did you decide to play heroes for this event in particular?
Well, basically, heroes have always been a really strong deck because of Dark Claw and all the combo power that the deck actually has. But seeing as we've got now the evil hero cards that just make the deck even better than it was previously with just the vision heroes. It just puts the deck on a whole other level. Basically, before we only had the Vision Heroes, which just allowed you to end for Dark Claw turn 1, and if your turn lot 1 got sort of interrupted, you didn't really have anything else. But now with stuff like Evil Heroes, it just gives you a bit much more of a push. Whereas if you have the Evil Hero of Dust of Gold, at the end of your turn, you can just search the Dark Calling, which allows you to have a Raigeki for the following turn to be able to clear your opponent's board. Also, the deck is able to main hand trap such as Nibiru, Ashblossom, and Imperm, which is very similar to Salamangreat in a way, where the deck ends on a somewhat weak turn 1 board, but that weak turn 1 board is very easy to beat other decks. Plus, Dark Claw just being a card that can just end the game against a load of decks in this format, being like Sky Striker, Orcus, Salamangreat, just all decks that revive around the graveyard. I thought it was an insane choice for this event, and as I said, it was really strong throughout the event. It was just the last those two things that really kind of stopped me from going into top 8.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that it's it's somewhat like Salamangreat in that you have the option to main 9 hand traps because the deck doesn't require you to mass on tons of cards just to play the game. But typically what we've seen in previous versions of certainly warrior decks and hero decks is they often end up losing due to cloggy hands, mismatched ratios, and issues like that. Is that something that you found this kind of deck still has, or do you think it's moved past that stage now?
The deck, obviously every deck is going to have those hands that don't really open very well. They are very weak if they open that kind of hand. And obviously I had it during the day because the last round I bricked. But honestly, this deck, with the amount of consistency that it has, and the amount of playability that you can get out of it, the hands that you open, as long as you're not opening something silly such as double increase, double Vion, even if you open double rallies, it's not even the end of the world. As long as you're not opening those really terrible hands, the deck is insane, and the chances of opening hands like that is somewhat very low. Like opening one Increase, one Vion is fine as long as you're able to get to your Forest, which is one of the key cards in this deck. So it does have those hands, but even though it has those hands, the deck still is very consistent to be able to play around those hands. Like even today, I was testing and I opened triple Mally and still won, and it was funny.
Yeah. Wow.
It was able to do just amazing, even if it opens those really awkward hands.
Yeah. This, to be honest, this must be one of the few times in the game when you could open triple Mally and still still establish a reasonable board.
Yeah, it was hilarious. It really was, and that was only because I opened the Stratos as well.
Yeah. Getting to play 3 is pretty nice. I mean, there are so many starter cards in this version of the deck now, right? You've got your Stratuses, your Vions, your Emergency Calls, so much.
Yeah, there's so many starter cards. Like the main starter you want to be seeing is obviously Vision Hero Forest, but there are so many other ways to start. As you said, Equal. There's Fusion Destiny, which is basically a one-card combo of sorts that allows you to get into your main play, but can also restrict you out of like the Bubble Man and Absolute Zero in the deck. But even still, it's still a nice card to give you a one-card combo. You've got Stratos, which just gets you to the Forest as well, and lets you start the combo. Like, there's just so many cards in the deck. Like, even Vion, to an extent, is a really nice turn 1 combo. Like, as long as you open Vion with, say, a way to get to the Soldier, then you can essentially make a turn 1 Dark Lord as well, which is really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. So the deck obviously then has the sort of like great power of going first with the Dark Lord, great power of going second with the Fusion Destiny options, and all the hand traps that you get to play. Is there a particular matchup that you think this deck really struggles against?
I would say this deck's potentially worst matchup was Sky Striker, just because Sky Striker has the ability to negate your main effects, but you can still play around them to an extent because of like Vision Hero Increase to be able to tribute the monster that they target, like Widowmaker and stuff. But side of like Sky Striker, that's now hit as well, so it makes this deck even better. I don't really feel like the deck has a really maybe like Thunder Dragon. If you open all your Searcher cards, then that's just a L in general. But if not, then you just run through them anyway. So it's 50-50 situation. But I would say its worst matchup was Sky Striker, but now it doesn't even matter.
Okay, yeah. That's a pretty interesting turn of events then, with the new ban list coming in, and we'll get to see just how impactful that is, whether there are more hero lists popping up, because they're potentially, going to have an easier matchup there as well, which is pretty nice. So, obviously, this is a hero list. There have been a few hero lists around. I'm not going to say there's been tons recently, because it's not been the most popular deck as of late.
Like the deck isn't very popular as of late, mainly because of like the Orcus combo was just so strong and prevalent. But as I said, this deck just runs through that deck, so it doesn't really matter.
Is there a defining characteristic of your particular builds that you think separates it from the sort of more standard versions?
Definitely my Bubble Man, Acid, and Absolute Zero. Basically, a lot of hero decks don't play these cards, and I feel like that is 100% wrong, because having access to a turn 1 for Absolute Zero and Dark Lord is insane. You have the ability to not only banish all cards your opponent controls, or in their hands or anything to the trigger, but you also have access to board wipe them at any point in time, which is absolutely insane. Like, it allows you to play around the back row decks if you go first. It allows you to play around the combo decks that make the same board, because you can do Absolute Zero Chaining 1 and then Acid Chaining 2, and it just allows you to pick insane boards sometimes. Like, honestly, it's not the best going second, but even going second, having the access to Absolute Zero to then just clear an opponent's entire board is absolutely insane.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a card that, really hasn't seen much popularity in recent versions of Hero, because it's just not dark. That's been pretty much the defining thing of Heroes in the last few years. It
has been, and that's one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of Fusion Destiny, to be honest with you. Basically, I'm not a fan of Fusion Destiny because of the dark and how it locks me out of my Bubble Man Absolute Zero play. So whenever I saw it during the entire regionals, if I had access to the Absolute Zero I always held it till the end of the combo in case I got Nibiru'd or in case there was just some random hand trap that stopped me from playing. So I felt like Fusion Destiny, being as good of a card as it is, locking it out of just that insane combo of having the Absolute Zero and the Bubble Man, it was something that I felt wasn't as good as that combo. So I felt like it wasn't the best, but you have to play it to make fun.
Yeah. So you'd still play it as a mandatory 3-of in future builds then?
Well, right now in testing, I'm playing it at 2, because I feel like the deck, even with free melee, I feel like it's a good card, but if you draw it late again, it's not going to really do much because you've normally wasted all your melees, and it's only really there to be able to be that turn 1 play, to get you into like a Dystopia or your standard combo that will end you on the Dark Claw Hope Dystopia pop. So it's kind of a 50-50 kind of card. I kind of want to play it free, but I feel like 2 is more of the ratio because you have to make space for the third melee and the third Stratos now.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your testing of this then, with the updated build, are there any other changes apart from trying to sort of fit in these extra copies of the best cards? Like, are you cutting down on the hand traps, or do you think they're all so important?
Well, I am slightly cutting down on some of the hand traps. Like currently, I'm going between either 2 Ash Blossom or 2 Nibiru, because they're the 2 hand traps that, in this format, I can expect to see more back row heavy decks just because of how Sky Striker are gone, how Thunder Dragon is definitely going to be the best deck now because there's just such a wide variety of area where like Orcust have now been hit to a degree without mermaids. The Orcust Element Great are somewhat better, but they kind of have trouble against Thunder Dragon to an extent because of one spell and other things. But it's like if you're trying to fit in all these cards, it's kind of like you either got to play triple Nibiru or triple Ash still, and I'm kind of 50-50 on either of them. I'm leaning more towards the Nibiru, obviously, because it can just ruin combo decks, but Ash Blossom still has very high potential, being that it can just prevent an entire combo if you hit the right card in that combo. So it's like a 50-50 sort of thing.
Is there a particular thing which you think this deck just 100% loses to, and you need to side accordingly? Or do you think it can play through most things?
I would say, obviously every deck has that one deck that it really does have problems with. I would say the deck that this has the worst time against, probably, I would say maybe Grand Marju to an extent, because Grand Marju having just the ability to play through an entire board of your cards, being like with the Bigfoots to pop all your cards, the Gizmek Orochi to just pop cards as well, and along with the Golden Castle, which kind of prevents you from attacking to an extent. All of these cards do kind of hinder the deck to a degree, but it's not 100%. Like it's kind of like how I said earlier with Thunder Dragons. If you open that hand that can't really play around it, you're not going to be able to beat it. But if you open the hand that says, "Oh, I don't really care," then you're just going to plow through it, and then you're going to do fine. Like it's a deck that is insanely strong, but obviously there are those hands that do lose to specific matchups.
Yep. Well, it should hopefully feel a little bit more consistent with the new version of the deck.
Yeah.
Yep. The adjusted ban list.
Free Stratos being able to pop back row, it doesn't really matter anymore, but it's still a deck that could potentially stop from winning.
Nice. Well, thanks very much for taking us through the deck and some of the theory. Is there anything else that you think it's important to note about this list?
Well, I would say the most important thing about this deck is that if you're going to play it, obviously you need to know you need to know how heroes work, because there are specific interactions with the deck, such as Stratos, where it's a when effect that if you do it as Chainlink 2 to attempt to summon it with like Solid Soldier, then you're not going to go anywhere and you're going to lose the effect. So know your effects, know your timings, and you'll do just fine.
Fantastic. And are there any shout-outs that you want to make?
Oh, big shout out to my own channel, Robert Bat1. Come check me out. I do videos weekly.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the description so you can head straight there.
Thank you. And my new team, Team Black Rose Dragons, we're slightly new. It's made by a friend of mine who wants to put their own into the community to a degree, so a bit of a shout out to them. But other than that, thank you for having me on the channel. It's great to show off my heroes.
No worries, it's been great having you. Lovely deck to look at, and thanks very much for all of the explanations on how everything sort of fits together in this list. And I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more heroes in the future, and hopefully you can come back on with another top as we move on to the winter competitive season.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely,
White Stick
absolutely.
London.
Go on top with
I'm
heroes.
a top White Stick London with hero. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. But